Welcome to No One Told Us, the podcast that tells the truth about parenting and talks about all the stuff you wish you knew before having kids. I'm your host, Rachael Shepard-Ohta, and today I am joined by Katie Marston. Katie is the Chief Marketing Officer for Once Upon a Farm, a fresh foodery dedicated to providing clean, nutritious, and delicious baby food. It's some of my baby's favorite stuff, and kids snacks, which help parents to kick off a lifetime of healthy eating. Katie's love of health-conscious brands began during her earliest years at Adidas, and she's also done marketing and branding for Brew Doctor Kombucha and Kendra Scott. Katie is a lover of creativity, laughter, and a good challenge, and she currently lives in Portland with her husband, Brad, and their 2 kids. And we were just talking before recording, so your kids are 7 and 9, you said?
They're 7 and 9, 15 months apart. I feel like I'm, seeing the daylight at this point in time.
I was going to ask you, when does it get easier?
Rachel, I would have loved for Once Upon a Farm when my kids were, babies, and selfishly, the kids snacks, I have a hand in because it's perfect for my kids now. But also your podcast, would have saved me so much anxiety. We moved our whole family to Austin to start the Kendra Scott role when my daughter was 6 months old. And we found out we were pregnant the first week we moved in a temporary apartment housing where my dog and my daughter were sharing the closet for sleeping.
Gosh. So the 2 under 2 thing was not something you were trying for necessarily.
No.
People want that close age gap, and all the power to them, because that sounds very intense and hard.
It's amazing now, and they're lovely, wonderful play dates for each other. But as you're saying, I really think I had the aha moment at 4 and 5. It's hard navigating work and the 2 reasons I love this is sleep and eating are 2 of the biggest challenges parents of young kids face. Yeah. And that time was tough for me. And I look back and I'm just pat myself on the back and friends that do that because it's not easy.
Truly. And you were working at pretty big companies this whole time too. So tell us a little bit about how you got started with Once Upon a Farm, or what led you to want to work in kids and baby food.
Yeah. I have such a random background of always, all of them have been brands of purpose, but, starting really in sports, I managed professional athletes for a while. Then went into jewelry with Kendra Scott, before really being interested in the food business and beverage with Brew Doctor. And it was there that I met John Foraker, formerly of Annie's fame. He was, the CEO at Annie's that helped that to rise and really such a leader in organic food. And got a chance to talk to Jennifer Garner, who's one of our co-founders, and Cassandra Curtis, the Chief Innovation Officer, who really started this all. And in talking to them, they were looking for a CMO. And I was actually put in touch with them to help them know what to look for. And I can tell you, within the first 45 minutes of talking to John, I was sitting in a Fred Meyer Kroger parking lot. We ended that call being like, are you interested? And I was sitting there being like, are you open to this conversation for me being interested? And from there, I have not looked back, and it's been the single best decision. I feel like we are making a real impact, and that's just feel good as a parent.
Of course. And to be able to provide things that you want for your own kids or that you wish you had, that is the dream.
Right. Same as what you're doing now with your audience with regard to sleep and a whole host of other topics that you're covering. This is selfish for me. I want lunchbox packing easier. I want, I wish I would have had different options for the feeding journey from first bites, and having it be, clean product. We're Clean Project Label awarded, and knowing a short ingredient list and feeling good about that. I wish I had those options as a working mom. I was steaming, mashing, putting it in ice cube trays, I would have given anything for a break at that
Oh
time.
my gosh, of course. Yeah, because I mean, we're all trying to do our best and feed our kids the best that we can, but it is time consuming to source good ingredients and to learn about what ingredients are healthy for babies. And then all of the meal prep and cooking, like you said, the shopping, like all of it, it's like a full-time job. It takes such a long time. And I think that's why brands like yours are so needed, because parents need something that's easy that they can also feel good about. And I think I look back to like what my mom probably fed me in the 80s and 90s. It was very different. It was a very different landscape.
Very different. And, I was just talking to a colleague in the industry the other day about the toughest thing I think to navigate now is we have so many experts and such a level of perfection put upon us while adding more to our plates, I think, as moms in particular, dads too, right? Dads have taken on so much more of an active parenting role than they did when their fathers were there. But you then feel like there's no perfect feeding journey. There isn't. And it's going to work individually for everyone. And there's different options out there for you to explore. And I think that is probably one of those stressors that we especially try to take away. I know you are, which is do what feels right for you. Like seek out those options, but there's not one perfect way to do this. And your kid is going to turn out great no matter what.
Yeah. And I think that's one of those common misconceptions with early parenting is that there is a right way and a wrong way, or there's a good versus a bad. And that's just not true. There's so many different ways to be a good parent, and feeding is just one component of those. What do you think is another big misconception about infant feeding or starting solids or just nutrition for little kids in general?
The biggest one is kind of what I said, that there's one right way to do it to create the most perfect outcome for your child to be a healthy eater. I would say make sure that there's fun sensory element. If your kid wants to play with the food, even as they get slightly older, it's so important from the feeling and this in the hands and also the sensory in the mouth to have a love for fresh. Variety is really key. I think one of the biggest questions we get asked is, it's of course easier for especially a baby to like something sweet. And I think that's where we've gone down a path, as society with added sugar, if we end up touching on that. But for vegetables or maybe even ingredients that have different textures to them, foods that have different textures to them, they might spit it out right away. It actually takes 10 times for acceptance of a new food. So don't be scared if there's a gag reflex. Don't be scared if there's like a funny face. That's just your child figuring it out, and keep the introduction, because it's actually the variety at an early age that creates a strong microbiome. And that's, we've been working with Dr. Dev Kota, who heads the Microbiome Institute at Cedars-Sinai. And it's actually a strong microbiome that's for kids like from starting solids to age 11 that provides a hearty immune support and anti-inflammatory properties. So you'll hear that, I think, more and more. And in today's, we were dealing with COVID, we're now dealing with RSV, really knowing that variety of foods helps to increase a likelihood of a strong microbiome, a strong immune system, is one of those easy things that you can do from first bites.
Definitely. And I think parents are scared to do that because the old advice was always like, oh, only introduce one new food every few days. And so parents feel like they have to go super slowly with each new food. And we know now that that's not so true. But those types of pieces of advice take a long time to kind of go away.
They definitely do. And if you have strong in-laws, views, or an older pediatrician, for instance, like, you can get that anxiety that I was talking about. And that's where it's not. There's a lot of misconceptions out there. And it is, your child the best. We offer like single ingredient blends for the very reason, for parents that want to start slow. But at the same time, there are those that jump right in on multi-ingredient blends. We also have plant-rich meals in the frozen section that are full ingredient. So, chunks of sweet potato and black beans. And so that if your child wants to do self-feeding and baby-led weaning, which is something that's very popular and you're comfortable trying that, there's that possibility for you. And it might not work for you. You might be like, nope, too scared, don't want to do this, going back. And like, go for it. Try it all and see what you like and then what your baby likes.
Yeah. And I think that's another misconception, right? Is that you have to choose. It's like people act like, oh, are you going to do purees or baby-led weaning, as if it's like a binary choice? And you can totally do both. Like my baby, we do primarily baby-led weaning, but we also give her purees and pouches and things like that when we're on the go and need a quick meal option. And it's great. You can do all of it.
Yeah. And it's interesting, like as I've, worked at Once Upon a Farm, and one of the things I've learned, like my daughter was extremely sensory. My kid was not. And my daughter was our first. Charlie was our first. And pouches would have been, and they were really great for her. I did not realize they were really great for her because she was much more sensory around food. And like that helped us to give the variety and then lead into, the types of meals that we were eating and complement that. And had I known that, had I recognized it, right, it would have just been a greater level of awareness, and which was very different from my son. He was much more self-feeding, from the get-go, handsy. Each child is incredibly different. And I laugh because I was so much more type A with my daughter. And I think that girl did not have sugar, like everything. My son has such a healthier attitude towards food because we had more fun with it, because there was more life in moderation. And it's hindsight is 2020. And if that's something I could pass on, it's just enjoy this process. Like eating with your kid, introducing them to food is a real bonding moment.
It should be fun. It should be fun, and it should be a family activity. And I think there are, like you said, so many experts out there and so many opinions, and parents, I think it is a huge stressor starting solids. I hear from parents all the time who are anxious not only about sleep, but about feeding. And they see me feeding my daughter and they're like, how are you not anxious about this? I'm having such a hard time with it. And my heart breaks for them, because food time and mealtime should be so enjoyable, and watching your child try new foods can be so much fun. You did just mention sugar. So I would love to touch on that, because that is something that I was also very type A about, wanted to do everything right. Didn't want to introduce sugar till my son was 2 years old. This was my first. I remember we were visiting my parents, and my mom and I got ice cream cones, and she let my son, he was like 8 months old, have a lick of her ice cream. And I lost my mind at her. Like I was so furious. And she was just trying to have like this sweet moment with her grandson. And, it maybe crossed a boundary. Maybe some people say I had a right to be mad, but when I look back now, like it was not a big deal. And now I'm on my third baby. Her brother and sister were enjoying popsicles a couple weeks ago, and they let her have a lick, and it was just like a fun family moment. And I was so happy that I could let go at that point and be like, this is not going to be the end of the world. But what do you guys say about sugar and when to introduce it or how much? Because there is a lot of kid food out there on the market, even marketed towards babies, that does have added sugar. So how do we know how much is too much or when is the right time?
Yeah. And Rachel, what you were saying, I know so many people identify with. I identify with that and look back and be like, gosh, okay, if I could take back that moment. And at the same time, I know, as you said, there are boundaries. There are, respecting someone's wishes, especially when they're first time, finding that balance. But we are no added sugar. We are unsweetened, real ingredient company. That being said, I think we're also very much aware, and you and I immediately go to, right, like a cookie or an ice cream. What I look at, there's added sugar. Like if you become aware of it, there is added sugar hidden in almost everything, whether it's ketchup, which kids consume a ton of, salad dressings, white bread, different types of bread, right? So there's that. How do you allow for the treat time moments? And I think one of the things that probably drives me the most insane is there's a lot of bars out there that start getting given at an early age that are glorified candy bars. Like, let's be honest. Like, don't try to tell me that something that looks like a Rice Krispie treat is better for you.
With chocolate chips all over it and sprinkles.
Yes. Yes. And I'm sorry. Let's just call it what it is. Like, I would rather be in the kitchen. I mean, who am I kidding? I don't remember the last time I made Rice Krispie treats, but I would love to think I could be in the kitchen, with the marshmallows and doing that. And if my kids see that. And so for us, it was about, especially from babies who, as you said, should not have added sugar before 2, and then really only 25 grams for children that are 2 and older. And that can be found in a lot of those hidden things. So being aware of labels, being aware of where added sugar comes into play. And the less you can introduce that or create this moderation, the more likely your child is to really have a love of things that taste fresh. Mm-hmm. So real ingredients, real fruits and vegetables, using spices for flavor. Like they will still enjoy and should have the birthday party treats and should have the occasional popsicle, like as you're saying, or, a popsicle every day should they choose. But it is about, from our side, teaching a love of real food.
Yeah.
And that really does start foundationally when you're young.
Yeah, I think that's so important too. And that was, I think, what originally attracted me to the baby-led weaning philosophy, because I really loved the idea of my kids feeding themselves and deciding how much and what they wanted to eat from their plate. And also just knowing what real food looks like and having just that variety of fruits and vegetables. Like my kids still absolutely love fruits and vegetables. It's funny because they still have different tastes, even though we approached food in very much the same way. I'm talking about my oldest two now. They're 5 and 3. My oldest, his favorite food is salad. Like he's just obsessed with fresh vegetables and loves all that stuff. My daughter is not so much into vegetables, but she loves fruits, and she loves proteins and real foods, and they still get excited about a treat. But we've tried really hard to not put treats on such a huge pedestal and to not make them such a big deal. They're just kind of like a part of life, and they're fun when we have them and they're delicious, but other food is also delicious. And we don't need to, to call food good or bad or healthy or unhealthy or, make all those judgments about food. It just kind of is what it is. Do you guys have any philosophy on that, or how to prevent pickiness or prevent that obsession with certain foods or certain treats?
Yeah, it goes back to that variety and opportunity.
Yeah.
And getting excited for the moment, the sensory part, like what things smell like, what things taste like. Like watermelon is just as exciting in our house as a popsicle.
Oh my God. My kids could polish off a watermelon in one sitting. They love it.
Yes. And so exactly what you're saying. And I think that was one of the biggest reasons that it was for starting and having our plant-rich meal line, was because we saw self-feeding become such an option that parents were wanting alongside all the others, and integrating beans into the mix for, plant-based protein, heartier vegetables. And so that starting off in an early age and giving that option to parents. And as you're saying, not creating a treat based on something that is sugary. I think treat's such a funny word. I love sugar. That's my vice, not salty things.
Yeah, same.
Not others. That's mine. But it is about enjoying it when you have it, and also thinking you don't need to have a dessert after dinner every meal, or an afternoon treat doesn't need to be something sugary. Just create that variety, mix it up. And I think the enjoyment of food and bring your kids into the process. That's mm-hmm. one thing I'll always say is, when you're cutting it up, when you're putting it together, if you're making guacamole, bring them into the kitchen, have them be part of that process. And I guarantee they are so much more likely to eat it if they play a role. There was that, I don't know, did you have that? I think it's called a leaning tower, learning tower. It's a crazy name for what it is.
Yes.
But, right? You put it in
learning tower, I think is what they're called. The
learning tower.
The big wood things that kids can step up on.
Yes.
It's like a gigantic step stool that they have walls around so that they can't fall off. Even though somehow my kids always manage to fall off of them. I don't really know how, but
my son wanted to climb that thing like a jungle gym.
Exactly. Exactly.
You could put it in the kitchen, and at the earliest age, they become counter height and can watch you and integrate. And I think mm-hmm. that's one of those that, at least from my side, and I know a lot of my colleagues, changed a dynamic around food and interest in all sorts of food versus treats.
Yeah. And I mean, we're lucky enough to live in a place that, I mean, we live in San Francisco. It's a very healthy lifestyle that is glorified here. There's farmers markets. My kids go, they see where food comes from and see where it's made. But I also realize that that's a privilege, right? And it's a privilege to be able to afford really fresh food. And it's a privilege to have the time to sit there and cook with my kids and to show them all of that. So I know that Once Upon a Farm is so passionate about tackling food insecurity. So I would love to hear a bit about what you guys have to say about how food insecurity and food deserts and things like that impact kids in the U.S.
Yeah. And you're right. Like, one of the reasons is you're saying, like, we recognize that there are more working parents at all levels than ever before. And so convenience has always been a part of what Once Upon a Farm does. Jen has been working with Save the Children for many, many years, I think 14 plus years now, if not longer. She's been on the board since 2014. And when I started, and then the pandemic quickly started, the number of food insecure children jumped up 2 million. Like, it was crazy. And
was it because there weren't kids? Sorry, go ahead.
No. I know you're like, I think is what you're going to ask is there weren't the food options at school as much anymore. And there wasn't as many, free food opportunities or getting delivered to the home, especially in rural America. And so we, in working with Save, kind of were like, okay, we're a small company, but what can we do here? We are a children's food company. We threw out the number of 1 million, that by 2024, early 2025, we would deliver 1 million meals to kids in rural America, whether that's through financial donations, our own food donations. We have volunteer hours, and we are on track to do so. And we've got ideas for how to, move past that 1 million meals mark. But from your question, I think it's kids cannot learn. They cannot meet their potential if they are hungry. I think we all know what happens when we're hungry. Our brain does not function as well. We are moody. We are tired. And so Save recognized that because they really look at learning potential. And if they weren't addressing food, they weren't really able to maximize learning potential. Whether it's Save, No Kids Hungry is another one. Feeding America. Locally, we work with a lot of stocking community fridges. Like, that's something that I've taken my kids to do here in Portland, Oregon, of a community fridge that you can stock with fresh food. And that is like the first stuff to go because it's the hardest to have access to. And a lot of times fridges can be smaller or not a lot of freezer space. And so Once Upon a Farm, I know, does that in the Bay Area quite a bit, but like, we've started doing it. Our employees have, where they live. And that's a local option that if you're interested in that, you can feel really hands-on in your community for making a difference.
I love that. I love the idea of bringing your kids to do it too. That's such a great thing to kind of teach them from the beginning, is that we're so fortunate to have these things and not everybody else does. And we need to do our part to make sure that everybody has fresh food, right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's, Jen will say, like, a lot of times when she's gone on home visits, sometimes that's the first time, she'll have watched a child try a mango for the first time, and it might be through one of our pouches, or food that's been donated. Like, and that's, you really do make a difference when you increase the variety of options of fresh food. And that's not accessible to everyone in the US. And we were the first refrigerated baby food that became part of the WIC program. So the government supplemental women's, infants, and children's program that offered, Once Upon a Farm to those that needed it.
That's amazing. I love that. And yeah, I love Once Upon a Farm. I mean, mostly because of the convenience. Also, obviously, I have 3 kids now. I need things that are easy.
Yeah, you need things.
I need things that are easy, but I also love supporting brands that I can really like get behind and that are so philanthropic and that really do care. So that's so wonderful. Katie, thank you so much for joining the podcast this week. I think it was so fun to hear about your own journey as a parent and about your amazing company and just giving parents kind of those words of wisdom from a seasoned mom, a mom that has seen the other side of the baby days.
The other side, for sure. No, and Rachel, I wanted to, like, for everyone listening, but I said, like, sleep was probably harder for me than nutrition. And I'm so appreciative of you and your voice. And my favorite post of yours, which rings true to this day. So I'm just going to caution new parents out there, what you should say, when your kid falls asleep at night.
Oh,
and I will tell you that what I say to my children, and started saying at a young age, I still do today, and they yawn instantly. Like, it is a connector. It is like, to both of them are songs I made up for them. And then we do what you say about, I love you. And we say, and then they give back more than your arms are wide. And like, it's like, you really do have these wonderful moments and insights that make a real difference on our side. So thank you.
Oh my gosh, you're going to make me cry. That is so sweet. I love that. And I love, I mean, some people follow me that don't have little babies anymore. They've been following me for a while, but things like that, like, that's what makes a childhood, right? Like, those are the things that your kids are going to remember that forever. And they might do it with their own kids someday because they loved it so much. It's so special.
I mean, I have walked away from meetings or dinners to sing to them in a hall of a, hotel restroom to do this. Luckily, I work for a company where that's celebrated, parented, and our, colleagues will try to film me doing it. But it does. Once you start it, it will keep going. I hope it keeps going until they get off to college. And
I know. Oh my gosh.
Those words.
I love that. That's so sweet. Katie, the last question I have for you is something I try to remember to ask everybody. I don't always, but I would love to know, especially since you've got kiddos that are a little bit older, what is something that no one told you before you had kids that you really just wish somebody had let you in on?
There's two things that stick out in my mind. One was on the sleep side, which we did sleep training. I wish that someone had said, like, there are a multitude of other options that you could try out that would create a similar result. I think at that time, as a working parent who went back at 8 weeks,
it's like criminal.
I felt like I didn't have options there.
Yeah.
The other is more one that I think we know, which is just relax. Like, it's harder said than done, but I wasn't going to listen to my mom telling me that, as much as I love her and think she's absolutely brilliant. I wish I had more friends that were just relax. I think you're in the moment with other parents in your similar situation and you feed off of each other.
100%.
And so having that kind of voice to be like, it's okay. Like, you're going to eat off the ground, or it'll be fine. Done. Yeah. It's going to be fine. And I think women are better about that now than they were 9 years ago.
I hope so. Yeah. And I feel the same way. I wish I could go back and tell myself to chill out, but those like mom groups are such a blessing and a curse, because if you are lucky enough to have a small village of women that also have babies, like, that is so wonderful. And it's so beautiful to walk through that experience together with other people who really get it. But I also wish that moms could have like almost like a cohort of other moms with kids that are way older. So that they could have that perspective and be like, girl, like, this is not going to matter in 3 years. Can you just chill out and let it go? Like, you really don't need to be doing all this. I have a friend, Kate Borsato, she's a therapist, and she told me, like, I promise it gets easy once your kid turns 5. And she's like, I know that's not what you want to hear when you have a baby or a toddler, but it does not last forever. It really does get so much easier. And that actually, I think some people would be horrified to hear that number because it seems so far away when you have a baby. But for me, it actually did calm me down to know that, like, I will have a life to myself again someday, and it's not going to be like this forever. So yeah, I love that.
So many things. But when you're living in it, I'm sure moms, dads, caregivers, 20 years from now will get in the same thing, and you can't help it. So it's so much easier said than done. But if you can give yourself just even an extra % of, you're doing a great job, let it go, that will not change the outcome.
Right.
to de-stress, do so.
Exactly.
Everyone is doing a phenomenal job and the best that they can. And this is hard. It is really hard.
Yeah. Amen. Thank you so much, Katie.
Thank you, Rachel. But worth it. Worth it.
Yes. Oh, of course. Worth it. We love them so much. They are worth everything and more. But yes.
Thank you so much, Rachel.
Thanks, Katie. You too.